Rev up your engine! This is a 99 LS 400 Lexus. V8 engine, rear wheel drive, something that they figured Americans wanted. And man, did it sell. The second year it was out, the LS 400 outsold Mercedes, BMW, Jaguar, all combined sales. That's how popular they were because they're a luxury car that performs but doesn't break down and cost a fortune to maintain. Now, they weren't cheap. This baby was $53,000 when it was new in 1999. That's a lot of money back then. Guy got his money worth. He's the original owner of this car. It was a dealer demo and he bought it with like 7,000 miles on it. So other than the first 7,000 miles, he's put on these 249,000. He loved the car, and rightfully so. It still works perfectly fine. He does have a little oil leak that we're going to check out. As we look under the hood, you'll see the reason of existence for this car. The Lexus V8 engine, the famous 1UZFE. And yes, it does have a timing belt. You notice he had it changed. Now yes, it's old school. Has a rubber timing belt. And yes, it is an interference engine. So if the timing belt broke, valves would hit the pistons, you'd have damage. Change the timing belt every 100,000 miles or so, you don't have to worry about that. But of course, if you're buying one of these used, you want to make sure that belt's been changed or change it immediately upon buying a car. You don't want to ruin the car because of a stupid rubber timing belts. All the new ones have metal timing chains. They've had them for years. This 2007 has a metal timing chain. They sold the heck out of these things because they were luxurious cars, good acceleration, handled like a dream, quiet, and didn't break down. But let's face the facts. This is a 1999. It's a 23-year-old car. Eventually, everything wears out and breaks. He's got some oil leaks. Let's do a test. You get some ultraviolet leak dye. You fill up the little container here. Then you pour the measured amount right in the engine. That's all you gotta do. And then screw the cap back on. Then we'll close the hood, take it for a spin, 10-15 minutes. As you can see, it's an old car, but hey, starts right up. Now this baby does have 249,000 miles, and when I shift it into reverse, it still idles pretty smooth. I can hear a little bit of cam noise and feel it, but hey, with that kind of mileage, it's not bad. And of course, it's an old car, so it doesn't have backup cameras or anything on it. And sure, it looks old-fashioned, as old as it is compared to new cars, but hey, still rides smooth. Transmission's a little bit delayed in shifting, but that's typical with this kind of mileage. They will shift a little bit rough here and there, especially when it's cold outside. That's something you live with the car, this kind of mileage. And of course the brakes stop it perfectly straight when you hit the brakes. It's got ABS and everything on it. Still handles good in the twisties, and we'll see what it does when we do our little drag strip here. Come to a stop, and we'll step on it. Still moves out. That V8 engine, transmission isn't bad. It's got a little bit of hesitation in it, but it's still pretty smooth. You feel safe and secure in this thing. It's a well-handling platform here. Now, the reason we're going to drive it around 10-15 minutes or so, the dye can circulate in the engine oil system. Wherever it's leaking, there'll be a little bit of green dye coming out. We can check and see where it's coming from. You get a vehicle this old, there are a million places you can get oil leaks on. Valve cover gaskets, rear main oil seals, you name it. It's an old car. The rubber's old. Eventually, everything does wear out. Nothing lasts forever, even a Lexus. Stable as can be, nice ride, still pretty quiet for how old it is. And of course, all the gauges and buttons still work. It's a Lexus. Heck, a guy I worked with in Houston, Gerald Treese at CBS, he had 350,000 miles on his and it was still running pretty good. He's passed away, but I bet his car's still running. When you think of it, not too many cars outlast their owners. Well, that one did. Who knows if the last bout of virus that I'm just getting over with, maybe my old Celica will outlast me too, like his LS 400 outlasted him. I never trust those hood supports when it's cold. This is a normal noise you're gonna hear on an engine with that mileage. You can hear a little cam noise, a little valve clatter. The Lexus Toyota design uses stainless steel shims on the valves. Each valve has little stainless steel shim. Now over time they wear. They're non-adjustable. What happens is if they get worn, you got to measure every single one, write down the figures. Then you got to take the engine apart. Then you got to get each shim, measure that. And then if it's too small, because the gap was too big, you got to buy a shim that's that much bigger. You got to measure it with a micrometer and buy the next bigger size, right? It is a royal pain in the butt. This thing's never had the valves adjusted. Nobody ever wants to spend that kind of money. Yet, it still runs good, so you get a little clatter noise. I've never messed with them in my Celica either with 240,000 miles. It's too much hassle, and they still run good enough, so who cares? That's normal noise. But we're gonna try to figure out where the oil leak's coming from. So shut the engine off. And we use these funky yellow sunglasses and a nice UV light. As you can see on my finger, I touched the bottle when I put it in. When you use the UV light, you can see the end of my finger is all yellow. That's the dye. It glows. You don't really see it without it. You put that on, you can see the yellow glowing on my finger. So basically, we're gonna look all over the place for that glowing yellow stuff. Valve cover gaskets, how often leak? But they're not shining here. We'll check the other side. I don't see anything glowing here either. When I look around, I just see the light itself, which is kind of purplish. I don't see any yellow yet, so I'm gonna have to jack it up in the air. So up and under we go. And as we look all around with the old purple light, what do we see? When we get to where the engine and transmission's bolted together, there's some dye coming out between the engine and transmission right there. See the dye? As I look closer in the front, here's some more. It's leaking right here. Coming from the front of the engine too. You can see it real clearly now. That's the bottom of the front of the engine, and there's the front of the engine up in there. Now in this case, it seems like the front's leaking more than the back. The front, you gotta take the front of the engine apart, replace the main seal in the front. The back, you gotta pull off the transmission to get to the back of the engine. It's easier pulling the transmission than it is taking the engine out to do the rear main seal. But either way, you're looking at a couple grand to have somebody take this engine apart and replace those things. Not really worth it. It's just dripping a little. So my advice for this car, change the oil and filter. You want clean oil in it. Put in a bottle of AT205 reseal. It rejuvenates rubber seals, and both the front main seal and the rear main seal of this engine is made out of rubber. It can rejuvenate it. I've seen them stop leaking entirely. And it's not cheap stuff. It might cost you 20 bucks for a bottle of this stuff, but what the heck? It's gonna cost you 2 grand to take an engine apart. If you can fix it for that cheap, every time you change the oil, just add another bottle of this. It rejuvenates rubber seals. It doesn't hurt anything, but it keeps rubber pliable. And the rubber in this car is 23 years old, so you know, things are gonna be worn. You don't really wanna take an engine apart for all that. It's got a little drip coming out of it. It's not that big of a deal. Now just for giggles, I'm gonna hook up my fancy thick scan tool and see what electronic shape this baby is in, as old as it is. Turn it on and we'll find out. We gotta put it in manually. It's an LS400 and it's a 99. We'll do a smart scan. Here we go. Notice it doesn't have as much stuff as the later model ones, but it still does quite a bit. Even air suspension still works. It has no codes, as old as it is. And there's no lights on in the dash. The car's in immaculate shape. Other than those minor oil leaks, and I'd say, live with that. It may be old, but it still goes down the road smooth as can be. You let go of the steering wheel, it still tracks straight. Just don't expect 100% perfection in a car pushing 25 years old. This is pretty close. Listen to that engine. That V8 just hums along. So even though I'm a fan of these old V6 Lexuses, there's nothing wrong with the really old V8s. They were built to last. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Other Scotty says, hey, I've owned over 70 cars in my life and bought a 2003 Grand Marquis. It runs great, but I want to have a dual exhaust. What do I do with those 4 catalytic converters? Do I need them? I'm not asking about the law, just how it might affect how it runs. All right, well, wow. You've owned 70 cars in your life. You are the other Scotty for sure, as your name says. Because I haven't even owned 7 myself in my whole life. 70, that's wild, right? Catalytic converters burn on-burn hydrocarbons. That's all they do. They're an anti-pollution device. By law, you're supposed to keep them on the cars, right? But in terms of the car running, you delete them, it'll still run perfectly fine. Now, you're going to get codes because the computer will know things have messed up inside. That's going to be your only hassle. Now, like if you live in Clarksville, Tennessee, where they don't do emissions inspecting, you don't care. You can just drive it around. Nobody cares. But if you live where they inspect them, your check engine lights are going to be coming on all the time because it knows that something's up. The computer system's going to know that. And it's an 03. It's set up for that stuff. I mean, you want to make it sound better with dual exhausts, you'd really have to put the cats back on, leave them on the system, and have everything set up so the same oxygen sensors are in the same position. Otherwise, your check engine lights will come on. But, on the other hand, it'll run perfectly fine. It won't affect that at all. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.